Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Ungar, and along with Sarah Algasham, who will be the project manager for this study of resilience to precarious housing and homelessness amongst young people who have had prior involvement in the child welfare system, I really wanted to just give you a very quick briefing on what the research is all about. I'm a professor at Dalhousie University, and along with Sarah, I'm at the Resilience Research Center there that I lead. So the reason for this particular piece of research was, our question was, why is it that many young people who go through child welfare and other support services who have had contact with that system end up quite fine? They move on to post-secondary education, they do quite well in life, that type of thing. And yet, we also know that, in a sense, a number of young people, quite a large number in fact, seem to go through or are involved with these systems, but still end up in some sort of precarious housing situation, or indeed homeless, after they age out of the child welfare systems or other sort of support services offered by the Department of Community Services and this type of thing. So our question is really about what distinguishes those two groups. And our suspicion is that there's a whole lot of things that that people who are social workers and all the other professionals involved in these young people's lives do really well, but that we don't necessarily have a roadmap to distinguish the young people who don't do well from those who actually succeed. So the purpose of this research isn't just to focus on what goes wrong and why young people end up homeless. Our research question is actually different. We want to understand what actually goes right. What is it that along the way gives children exactly what they need to succeed and avoid any kind of precarious housing situation? Basically, I know it sounds like an obvious question, but actually nobody knows. Funding came available, about $800,000, so a sizable amount of funding has come available through a very large project focused on youth homelessness nationally in Canada called Making the Shift. Stephen Gates, who's the lead on that out of York University, and I'm myself am one of the sort of the co-applicants on that grant. So we've taken a portion of that money for the national studies and focused it here on specifically here in Nova Scotia, and we're the test case. We're going to be doing a study that no one else in Canada, indeed no one else in the world, has ever done. So this is really quite a unique, and if it works, they're going to replicate, they're going to do the same study elsewhere. So essentially what it is it's looking at, we're going to work with as many young people who are already involved in child welfare and other community-based services where there were, obviously concerns related to child maltreatment, et cetera, for a group of children aged 14 to 17. And our goal is to track them for about 3 years and to basically watch. So for the 17-year-olds, they'll be 20 or 21 by the time they're finished, and for the 14-year-olds, they'll be about 17 when they're finished, and to see who moves through which systems, which supports, who has problems at school, who succeeds at school, and indeed who ends up in some sort of, what are their housing situations at the end of that time period as well. So it's a 3-year study. It begins, actually, so there's several phases. It begins with a more participatory action kind of research. We're going to be working intensely with a smaller group of youth to understand what some of the issues could be that they would be confronting along the way, to make sure that that voice directly from young people informs the rest of the study as well. The next part of it, of course, is a larger survey. We're hoping to enroll up to 300 young people between the ages of 14 and 17 and track them over 3 years to see actually what happens. And we have a sort of a 45-minute questionnaire that we'll do. These are not questions that are unique to this study. We've done work like this with lots of other populations that look very similar to these kinds of young people, but we've never really had an opportunity to focus in on young people who are all involved with the child welfare system or community services that are meant, more voluntary services that are meant to sort of prevent that kind of vulnerability. The third phase will be that we'll go back to about 20% or approximately 60 of those 300 young people that we're following and do a series of interviews with them. Because let's face it, you ask questions, you never really understand if they're just ticking boxes what their answers really mean. So we want to get deeper into their lives and a little bit about their experiences and some of the things that hopefully they can tell us are actually protecting them as they move along and are making them or setting them up for success. The fourth part of the study is that we'll ask those 60 kids from that, so it's 300 down to 60 that we're going to intensely work with, and we're going to ask those 60 if we can also look at their files. So we'll need permissions, of course, from their guardians as well as from themselves, so that we can go into their files and just to be clear, it's all anonymized. We're not looking at what specific workers did at specific moments. What we want to know is more patterns. Very simple, high-level questions. We want to know at what point, say, was a child seen by were they followed for a particular time in the family? At what point did that either break down or was that successful and did it end? Did they get referred to other services? Did they get, what kind of services did they get in what combination of services? Unfortunately, you just can't ask kids these because, of course, they're not very reliable in terms of them remembering who they saw or when they saw that person or whatever. So what we want to do is just get a chronology of services over time. And you can imagine when you get 60 of these all put together, you can begin to see patterns in terms of, wow, look at that. This kind of constellation of problems produced, and then this kind of service worked. And look, this child continued into school and was actually very successful. And here we see an intense pattern of something happened. And we've done, to be fair, we've done this with other studies. And we've actually worked with, in Nova Scotia here, with child welfare files in the past and found exactly these kinds of patterns. The goal, of course, is that no individual workers, and there's no sense of judgment of individual departments or workers or anything like that. The point is simply for us to better understand, on a big scale, how could we, when do we intervene with what services at what time points that will be the most effective? You combine that, of course, with the participatory research that we began the study with. You begin that with a survey of 3 years following a group of 300 young people as they move through services and hopefully end up doing really well. And you follow that with in-depth qualitative interviews. You have a huge amount of information. And we know from the deputy minister straight down through all the directors of the department that this is information that is valuable and won't cost the province of Nova Scotia very much, or really anything at all, since all the money is coming through the federal granting agencies. So this is what the study is meant to do. The biggest part, and we're trying to minimize the workload on any individual worker, so we've agreed that we will hire or second out of a position a social worker from inside the department itself, and so that person will be making the initial contact with young people to get to see if they want to participate in the study. Once a young person agrees to participate in the study, the idea is that it's completely confidential, so that the workers can't. The idea is the child doesn't have to feel awkward about will my work should I participate or not? Will my worker know or anything like that? It's completely separate, and so once the child agrees to participate, will be contacted by a worker in the department, the child will say, yeah, I'd be okay with participating in that study. If that's the case, that child then is referred to us at Dalhousie University, and a research assistant or myself will actually contact that young person and ask them the questions that we need to ask them. And that way, it's kind of hands-off. It's all very secure and safe for the child, and of course, we're not, as I say, we're not identifying individual workers or even indeed individual parts of the programs or anything like that. What we're looking for is these broader patterns that can help us from a policy point of view eventually predict, hopefully, why so many children come through the services that we provide them, and so many do incredibly well in life, but unfortunately some don't. We know that some end up homeless and indeed continue their vulnerability. A lot of that, of course, will have to do with the profiles of who they are and the kinds of abuse and the challenges that they brought into services, but some of it will also have to do with how we as systems work together and provide services. And hopefully, if we're all on the same page, we can get kids exactly what they need and create far more successful stories. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to collaborating and eventually bringing all of you some great results that can actually inform practice. So if you have any questions, of course, we're always here. All the best.